I was looking at the news this morning, just the standard doom scrolling we all do with our coffee. And it struck me how chaotic it all feels.
Right.
One minute it's a border crisis that seems completely insoluble. The next it's a pandemic that just shuts down the entire planet. Then a bank collapse that comes out of nowhere.
It feels random.
It feels so random. It feels like the world is this wild, overgrown mess that nobody is actually steering. We're all just kind of ricocheting from one crisis to the next.
That is the default feeling, isn't it? The chaos theory of history. Stuff just happens, leaders react, mistakes are made. It's almost comforting in a way.
Comforting how?
Because it means nobody is really to blame. It's just, the weather. It's just entropy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you sent me this stack of documents for today's deep dive. And I started reading, and I realized maybe the chaos is the point.
Huh.
Or rather, maybe what looks like a wild jungle to us, the plants on the ground, is actually a very, very carefully landscaped garden to the people looking down from the balcony.
That is the core metaphor we are grappling with today. It's the gardener hypothesis. And I have to warn you and our listeners, once you look at the world through this lens,
It changes things.
it changes everything. This idea that the weeds, the flowers, and even the storms are managed events. It is very, very hard to unsee it.
It's honestly kind of terrifying. We're talking about a source text today that argues democracy, as we know it, is essentially just a user interface,
A screen.
a screen, desktop background. And the real operating system, the code running underneath, is run by two very specific, very anonymous groups of people, the American gardeners and the British gardeners.
And before we dive straight into that rabbit hole, we need to be really clear about the ground rules here.
Okay.
We aren't saying this is the absolute truth. We aren't sitting here in tinfoil hats or telling you to, buy gold and move to a bunker.
Right. This isn't an endorsement.
No. We are taking a really dense, really radical geopolitical theory, and we're going to treat it as a simulation.
We're stepping into the matrix.
Precisely. For the next hour, we assume the gardeners are real. We assume this two-tier world exists. And we just test the logic.
Just hold up.
Does it explain the unexplainable? Does it make sense of all the contradictions we see in global politics? We are impartial observers just trying to understand the internal logic of a very, very scary worldview.
Okay, so let's boot up the simulation. In this world, the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of the UK, the Chancellor of Germany, they aren't the CEOs of their countries.
No, not even close.
Yeah.
In this model, they are at best middle management.
Middle management.
Or arguably, and I think this is a better term for it, they are the PR department.
The PR department. Wow, that's a blow to the ego.
It is, but think about their actual function. They give speeches, they shake hands, they kiss babies, they take the blame when things go wrong.
Because it's the face of the company.
Exactly. But do they design the system? Do they decide the long-term 50-year trajectory of the global economy? The source argues, absolutely not.
So if the guy with the nuclear codes is just the mascot who is actually calling the plays, that's what we need to figure out. Let's start with the structure. The source calls it the architecture of power.
To understand this, we have to start with the two-tier distinction. This is the absolute foundation of the entire theory. The world is divided into two distinct floors, Tier 1 and Tier 2.
And Tier 2 is us, the normal people.
Tier 2 is everything you see. It's the public face. It's the White House press briefings. It's the G7 summits. It's the billionaire tech moguls fighting each other on Twitter.
So even the most powerful people we can think of.
Think of anyone, Elon Musk, Joe Biden, Putin. In this model, they are all Tier 2.
Which implies there's a private face, a Tier 1.
Tier 1, the gardeners. And the source makes this fascinating distinction here about why they're in Tier 1. It's not just because they have more money, although they certainly control the flow of it.
What is it, then?
It's because they have subjectivity.
Subjectivity. Okay, that's a big philosophical word. Break that down for us.
Think of it like a video game. Tier 2, the politicians, the public CEOs, they are all NPCs.
Non-player characters.
Exactly. They have scripts, they have roles, they can react to the environment, they can get angry, they can even start wars, but they cannot change the source code of the game itself. They operate within the parameters that have been set for them.
And Tier 1.
Tier 1 are the developers. They are the ones with true agency. They write the code, they design the map. But here's the catch, the most important rule of the game.
Which is?
To keep that agency, they must remain completely invisible.
Why? I mean, if I ruled the world, I'd want my face on the currency. I'd want the statues.
Yeah.
Isn't that the whole point of having power?
And that is exactly why you aren't a gardener.
Huh. Fair enough.
The text argues that fame is a trap. It's a massive vulnerability. If you are known, you can be targeted. If you are the king, the peasants can storm the palace and, you know, cut off your head.
Right. If you're a famous billionaire, you could be sued, sanctioned, canceled, or kidnapped. You have a physical address.
You're a target. So anonymity isn't just a shield.
It's more than that.
It's a survival mechanism for the bloodline. The text argues that real dynastic power, I'm talking power that lasts 200, 300 years, it cannot exist in the light. It has to be formless.
Like a ghost in the machine.
Exactly. The moment a gardener steps out on a balcony and says, I am in charge, he immediately demotes himself to Tier 2. He becomes a commoner in the eyes of the system because he is now subject to the judgment of the crowd, to the laws, to public opinion.
That's such a flip on how we usually think about success. We think success is being famous, having your name on a building. This theory says ultimate success is being a ghost.
It is. You want to be the wind, not the flag. The flag gets tattered and torn, the wind just keeps blowing.
Okay, so we have these ghosts, the American gardeners and the British gardeners. But this brings me to the eternal football concept you mentioned. I found this part really, really counterintuitive.
How so?
If you are a shadow government and you have all this power, why not just unite? Why have two teams? Why not just have one big global government and be done with it?
Because monopoly leads to rot.
Rot. like biological rot. Decay.
Yes, exactly. The source draws on this almost biological or evolutionary idea. If a system has total control, if it has no enemies, no competition, it stops evolving.
It gets stagnant.
It gets fat, lazy, corrupted, and eventually it collapses under its own weight. It loses its vitality. Its immune system shuts down.
So the American gardeners actually need the British gardeners.
They need the game. They need the friction. They play what the source calls eternal football. They want to win the match. They want to control this oil field or that currency zone or that new technological standard, but they never, ever want to burn down the opposing team's stadium.
Because if the league ends,
the whole power structure dissolves. There's no more game to play.
It's like Coke and Pepsi. I've heard this analogy before. If Pepsi suddenly disappeared, Coke would probably become terrible and expensive and eventually fail. They keep each other sharp.
That is a perfect analogy. It's a managed rivalry. They trade territories. They compete for influence over specific countries. But they preserve the game itself above all else. Total victory, the elimination of the other side, would mean the beginning of the end.
And this source gives some pretty wild historical context for this. It suggests that back in the day, pre-20th century, there were lots of independent teams on the field.
Right. The text argues that the 20th century was essentially a massive M&A, a mergers and acquisitions process.
A corporate consolidation.
A brutal one. World War I and World War II weren't just wars between nations for land, they were hostile takeovers, where the independent players were swallowed up by either the American or the British spheres of influence.
And who are these independent players who lost their seat at the table?
The source explicitly lists empires that lost their subjectivity, their true independence.
Yeah.
The Ottoman Empire, the French, the Japanese, the Germans.
So before the wars, they were gardeners too.
They had their own agency. They were players. After the wars, they became part of the garden. They became managed territories, assets on the board.
So when we see the president of France today, in this theory, he isn't the leader of an independent power. He's, what, a regional manager for a larger franchise?
It sounds harsh, but yes, that is the claim. And then there's that specific, really detailed claim about Russia.
I found this part fascinating because it completely reframes the entire Cold War. The source claims that the Russian Revolution in 1917 wasn't a grassroots uprising of the proletariat.
Not even a little bit. It describes it as a joint venture, a business deal.
A deal between who?
The source posits that the Germans sent Lenin's team, the management consultants, if you will, and the British bought out the Masons in the Duma to facilitate the collapse of the Tsar. Russia was taken on shares.
So like a 50-50 split.
Or something like it. But then it says the partnership broke up.
In a very bloody way.
In an incredibly bloody way. The text interprets the year 1937, the absolute height of Stalin's purges, as a corporate restructuring, a hostile takeover.
How so?
It claims that Stalin, who the source identifies as a British asset in the shadow game, brutally eliminated the German layer of management.
Okay.
And at the same time, the American layer, which was represented by Trotsky.
So when we read history books about the Great Terror, about the show trials and the executions of all those old Bolsheviks, this theory says we are actually reading about a hostile boardroom takeover where the British faction secured 100% ownership of the Russian asset.
That is the internal logic, yes. It reframes political ideology, communism, capitalism, fascism as simply cover stories.
They're just marketing brochures.
Exactly. The brand identity for the franchise. The reality is just management teams fighting for control of the asset.
That brings up a question about the managers themselves, the gardeners. How do you get that job? Is it just a family business? Do you have to be born a Rockefeller or a Rothschild?
It's described as a mixed system, which again speaks to that deep, abiding fear of rot.
They don't want to get stagnant.
Never. So the source mentions bloodlines, of course. If you are born into one of these specific families and you show talent, you inherit the power. But they are brutally pragmatic.
How so? What happens if you're not talented?
If a child is weak or stupid or just lacks the killer instinct, they are sidelined to honorary retirement.
What does that mean?
It means they get a nice trust fund, maybe a seat on a charity board, a villa in the south of France, but they do not get the keys to the kingdom. They are kept far away from the real decisions.
So no feeling upwards at Tier 1.
It's far too dangerous. If you put an idiot in charge of the machine breaks. But they also know they need fresh blood to prevent genetic and intellectual stagnation. The source uses a very predatory term here,
Which is
wild game.
wild game, like hunting.
In a way, they are constantly scouting for wild talent from the outside, people who rise up on their own and prove they are ruthless, highly intelligent, and capable. These outsiders are identified, initiated, and eventually co-opted.
They're brought into the fold.
They are made one of them. It's a way of absorbing potential threats.
Right. If you see a brilliant strategist rising up in the wild, someone who could potentially build their own rival power base, you don't fight him.
You recruit him. You invite him to the lodge. You show him the real map of the world. And you say, join us, and you can play the real game. Or stay out here and get crushed.
Okay, so we have the players, the invisible gardeners, American and British, playing a game of eternal football, using the world as their pitch.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where I always get stuck with these kinds of theories.
The mechanics.
The mechanics. How do you actually control a guy like the President of the United States?
Mm-hmm.
Or a dictator with nuclear weapons? The source calls this the agent principle problem.
This is the interface of control, and the source material is surprisingly detailed and frankly chilling on this. It acknowledges that it is incredibly difficult.
Of course.
You have a Tier 2 leader, someone with an army, with nuclear codes, with a massive ego. You can't just send them an SMS saying, launch the missiles.
Right. New phone, who dis? Plus, the digital trail would be suicide for an anonymous group. If that text gets leaked, the game is over.
It's all over. So the source outlines 3 specific mechanisms of control. The first is what they call the invisible conductor, or contextual control.
Contextual control. That sounds
Yeah.
subtle, devious.
It is the art of giving someone no choice while making them think the choice was theirs all along. The gardeners don't give direct orders. Instead, they manipulate the reality around the leader. They control the inputs.
Okay, walk me through this. Let's say I'm the president. I want to focus on domestic policy. I want to build bridges, not bomb them. But the gardeners want a war in, say, Region X. How do they make me do it without ever asking?
Okay, so imagine you're weak. It's Monday. You get an intelligence briefing from the CIA, which, remember in this theory, connects to Tier 1 via the lodges. The briefing says, Mr. President, Region X is moving troops. They're planning an imminent attack.
So right away, I'm on edge.
You're on the defensive. Then, on Tuesday, the Federal Reserve, another interface, raises interest rates or tightens the money supply. The markets crash. Your poll numbers tank. Suddenly, you look weak.
And the media starts piling on.
Exactly. On Wednesday, the media owned by Tier 2 proxies who are loyal to the system starts running stories about how indecisive you are. Is the president asleep at the wheel while the world burns?
So I'm getting squeezed from 3 different sides. My economy is tanking, my enemies are on the move, and the press is eating me alive.
You're in a corner. And then, on Thursday, your oracle walks into the Oval Office.
The Oracle. This is the second mechanism, right? The Masonic filter.
Yes. The Gray Cardinal. This is a key figure. It's never who you think. It's not the Secretary of State. It might be your chief of staff or your personal doctor or just an old friend from university who you trust more than anyone on earth.
Someone who seems harmless?
Someone who isn't a threat to your ego. But this person is an initiate. They sit down, pour you a drink, and say, Mr. President, I know it's tough. This looks bad. But my gut tells me, if you hit Region X now, you look strong. You rally the country. The markets will stabilize.
And because everyone else has been feeding me this steady diet of bad news, This suddenly looks like a brilliant lifeline.
It feels like an epiphany. You think it's your idea to save your presidency, you slap the table and say, damn it, that's what we'll do, let's do it. But actually, you are just walking through the only door they left open for you.
That is incredibly manipulative. It's gaslighting on a geopolitical scale.
It is, and the text mentions a synchronization protocol to reinforce it. If you hesitate, if you ignore your friend's advice, suddenly you hear the exact same phrase from a completely unrelated source.
Like who? Give me an example.
A friendly foreign leader you trust mentions it in a phone call. A favorite news anchor you watch writes an op-ed about it using very similar language. The head of the central bank drops a hint in a public statement.
So suddenly, it feels like this isn't just one person's advice. It feels like objective reality is pointing in one direction.
It's a surround sound echo chamber created artificially to confirm the oracle's advice. But let's say the leader is still defiant. Let's say he's smart, he's stubborn, he goes rogue.
He refuses to play ball.
He decides to expose the system or just refuses. Then they move to Mechanism 3, the Damocles Sword.
Punishment!
This is the nasty stuff.
I can imagine.
The source lists a few methods. First, and most terrifying, is biological vulnerability.
What does that mean?
The Gardeners have access to the leader's personal doctors, who are also part of the network. Disobedience can lead to a very sudden stroke or a fast-acting cancer.
Yikes. So death by natural causes.
Plausible deniability is everything. Then there is compliment. But we're not talking about your average political scandal. The source calls it level 0 blackmail.
Level 0.
Information so damaging, so taboo, it doesn't just embarrass you, it completely destroys your legitimacy. It makes you a pariah to everyone, everywhere. It erases you.
And finally, if that doesn't work,
the elite revolt. This is the last resort. The Gardeners signaled the leader's own entourage, his generals, his oligarchs, his ministers, that their money is unsafe.
how do they do that?
A quiet word in Switzerland. A sudden freeze on an offshore account. The message is simple. Your leader is taking you all off a cliff. If you want to keep your yachts and your villas, get rid of him now.
And the entourage, to protect their own assets, stages a palace coup. The leader is removed by his own people.
It's a comprehensive fail-safe system.
But I have to ask, leaks? People talk. If this system is so huge, involving banks and doctors and advisors, surely someone spills the beans. Surely a disgruntled ex-gardener or a horrified oracle writes a book.
The source addresses this directly with what they call the Mockingbird defense.
Like Operation Mockingbird, the old CIA program to influence the media.
A similar concept, but weaponized against truth-tellers. If a leak occurs, the system doesn't just silence the person, that just draws attention. You know, the Streisand effect, right?
Right. You try to hide something and it becomes more famous.
Exactly. So instead, they discredit the information.
How do you do that?
They take the leaked truth, the actual sensitive document, the testimony, whatever it is, and they mix it with absolute, undeniable insanity.
They poison the well.
They poison the entire water table. They bundle the real leak with theories about flat Earth or reptilians or microchips in your cereal or, you know, satanic panic.
Oh, I see. So if I find a document proving the existence of the Gardeners and I public it, they just flood the internet with bots and proxies saying yes. And the Gardeners are actually lizard people from Mars who live in a hollow Earth.
Precisely. And now you are no longer a whistleblower. You are a lunatic. You are radioactive to the serious public. No reputable journalist will touch your story because it smells like crazy.
It's a brilliant way to hide the truth in plain sight by wrapping it in the clown suit.
It is disturbingly effective.
That is, yeah, distressingly effective.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how many crazy conspiracy theories are actually just truths wrapped in poison ivy.
That is the question, isn't it?